Rapunzel by the Brothers Grimm. There once lived a man and his wife who had long wished for a child, but in vain. Now, these people had a small window in their cottage that looked out onto a beautiful garden full of luscious vegetables and gay flowers. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and nobody dared to enter it because it belonged to Mother Gothel, a dreadful witch whose power was so great that everyone feared her. One day, when the witch's garden was at its very best, the wife stood at the window, feasting her eyes on the tempting rows of vegetables that grew there. Her mouth watered as her eyes raced along the smooth, crisp green rows. But when her glance fell upon a large bed of rampion, called Rapunzel in that country, which is a sort of lettuce, a strange feeling came over the woman. The rampion looked so fresh and enticing that she longed to eat some. She knew no one could have any of the witch's vegetables, but no matter how she tried, she could not forget the rampion in the witch's garden. Her longing increased every day, and as she knew it could not be satisfied, she began to look pale and miserable and to pine away. Then her husband grew alarmed and said, "Dear wife, what is troubling you?" "Oh," she said, "if I do not have some of that rampion that grows in the witch's garden, I feel I shall die." The husband, who loved his wife dearly, said to himself, "Rather than let my wife die, I shall get some of this rampion for her, no matter what the cost may be." So that evening at twilight he climbed over the wall and into the garden of Mother Gothel. He hastily gathered a handful of the longed-for rampion and brought it to his ailing wife. She quickly made a salad of it and enjoyed it to her heart's content. She relished it so much, in fact, that after 2 or 3 days had passed, she gave her husband no rest until he promised to get her more. So, again in the evening twilight, he climbed the wall, but as he slid down into the garden on the other side, he saw to his horror the witch standing before him. He was terrified, as with glaring eyes she cried, "How came you here? You have climbed over my wall like a thief and stolen my rampion. You shall pay dearly for this." "Oh," he answered, "please be merciful, I beg you. I have done this only out of the greatest need. My wife sees your rampion from our window and has such a longing for it that I fear she will die if her wish is not fulfilled." Then the witch's anger cooled a little, and she replied, "If what you say is true, then you may have as much rampion as you like, on one condition: that you give me your first child. I will care for it like a mother, and all will go well with it." In his distress, the husband promised everything the witch asked, for he thought he and his wife would never have a child. About a year after this, however, a wonderful thing happened. The child the couple had so longed for was the child the couple had so long hoped for was born. It was a lovely little girl. In their happiness and joy, they forgot the promise to the witch, but Mother Gothel had not forgotten, and soon after the baby was born, she came to claim her. The couple pleaded, but the witch said that if they did not give her the baby, she would put a spell on the child. The poor parents did not want this to happen, so with great sorrow they gave her the baby. She called her Rapunzel, after the very plant in her garden that had caused so much trouble. Rapunzel was the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, Mother Gothel shut her up in a tower that stood in a wood. This tower had no door or staircase, but only a little window quite high up in the wall. When the witch wanted to enter the tower, she would stand at the foot of it and call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." For Rapunzel had beautiful, long hair that shone like spun gold. Whenever she heard the witch's voice, she would unbind her golden locks and let the long braids fall over the high window sill. They hung down to such a length that the witch could climb up them, as if they were a ladder to the tower window. Rapunzel lived in the lonely tower in this way for several years. One day it happened that the king's son was riding through the wood. As he came near the tower, he heard a voice singing so sweetly that he stood still and listened as if spellbound. It was Rapunzel in her loneliness trying to pass the time away by letting her sweet voice ring out into the wood. The king's son, eager to catch a glimpse of the singer, looked for a door in the tower, but there was none. So he rode home. But Rapunzel's song had touched his heart so deeply that he came every day to the wood to listen to it. Once, as the young prince was standing there behind a tree, he saw the witch approach the tower and heard her call, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Then he saw how Rapunzel let down her long tresses and how the witch climbed up by them and entered the tower. When he saw Rapunzel, he fell in love with her and determined she should be his bride. So the following day, at dusk, the prince went to the foot of the tower and called, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel, thinking it was the witch, leaned forward and let her golden braids down, and the prince quickly climbed up them. At first Rapunzel was terrified at seeing a strange man come into her room through the window, but the young prince looked at her with such friendly eyes and talked with her so gently that Rapunzel soon began to lose her fear. The prince told her that her singing had so touched him that he could not rest till he had seen her. On hearing this, Rapunzel forgot her fear, and they talked together for some time. And when he asked if she would have him for her husband, she consented at once, for, she thought, he is young and gentle, and he'll certainly be kinder to me than old Mother Gothel. So she put her hand in his and said, "I will gladly go with you and be your wife, but I do not know how to get out of this tower. Unless," she added after a pause, "you will bring me a skein of strong silk every day. I shall twist the skeins into a ladder, and when it is all finished, I will climb down it, and you can take me away on your horse. But come only in the evening," she added, "for the old witch always comes in the daytime." The prince came every evening and brought some silk. The ladder Rapunzel was making grew longer and stronger and was very nearly finished. The old witch, of course, knew nothing of what was going on until one day Rapunzel, not thinking of what she was about, turned to her and said, "How is it that you take so much longer to climb up than the prince? He can come up in a moment." At that, the wicked witch screamed in fury, "Oh, you wicked child! What is this I hear? I thought I had hidden you safely from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her rage, she seized Rapunzel's beautiful hair, wound it around and around her left hand, snatched up a pair of shears, and snip, snap, the golden braids fell to the ground. And the witch was so hard-hearted that she dragged poor Rapunzel away into a wild, deserted place and left her there to live in loneliness and misery. But on the evening of the day in which she had driven poor Rapunzel away, the witch went back to the tower and fastened Rapunzel's braids onto a hook in the window. And when the prince came and called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she let down the braids, and the prince climbed up as usual. But instead of his beloved Rapunzel, he found, to his dismay, the horrid witch looking at him with her evil, glittering eyes. "Ah!" cried she, mocking him, "you came to fetch your little bride, but the pretty bird is no longer in her nest, and she will sing no more, for the cat has seized her and will soon scratch your eyes out too. Rapunzel is lost to you forever. You will never see her again." The prince was beside himself with grief as he heard this, and in his despair he leaped from the tower window, falling among the thorns and brambles beneath. He escaped with his life, but the thorns pierced his eyes so cruelly that he could not see. Now he wandered blind and miserable through the wood, where he ate nothing but roots and berries, and could do nothing but lament and weep for the loss of his lovely bride. So he wandered for a year. Wretched and unhappy as could be, until at last he came upon the desert place where Rapunzel had been living. Suddenly he heard a voice which seemed strangely familiar to him. He hurried in the direction of the sad, sweet sound, and when he was quite close, Rapunzel recognized him and flew into his arms, weeping for joy. Two of her tears touched his sightless eyes, and in a moment he could see with them as well as ever he had. Then the prince led Rapunzel to his kingdom, where they were welcomed with great delight by the king and queen, and they lived happily ever after. The end.